So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the fingers on this hand right here. This can be the most tedious part of skinning up your rig and could be time consuming. But luckily, the way I do it, the equation is pretty much the same with my weighting on all digits. So it could be a quick process. So I'm gonna go ahead and just add a full influence to the tip here. Pretty straightforward. It's always helpful to be able to select your envelopes. And then use the loop tool here to select the rest of the verts. So on most hands with the finger pivots or the finger joints, it's usually split up with 3 intersections and then a conjoining intersection where it bends. So what I typically do is I'll grab all these verts, which is the bottom row, assign that to full influence to the parent of the fingers, and then I'll blend to the child with a 0.4. And then I'll grab the middle section of the verts, go ahead and assign that full influence to whichever bone you have selected, and then do a half influence. But for these bottom verts, I like to add more influence to the parent bone, which is this one. So I'm going to add a 0.6. And then do the same thing as you did here to the child bone. So I'm going to add full influence real quick, select the child, and then add the 0.4. So now I'm going to select these verts and add the influence from the child bone, which is going to be a 0.4. And that's pretty much what I do on all the joints for the fingers. So for this one, quickly add a full influence, and then select the parent and add 0.4. Since these verts are more towards the middle of this bone, I'm going to go ahead and add full influence for right now. And now I'm going to select the verts that are in between these two bones, do a quick full influence, and do a 0.5 to the parent bone. So since I added 0.4 influence on these verts to this bone, it only makes sense that the influence from this bone will be less since it's farther away. So I'm just going to go with 0.3 right now. For these circular verts, I tend to just try and select them all right now for all the digits. And then what I'll do is just add full influence to the hand. And then once I get all my digits skinned up the way I like them, then I'll move on to start adding their influence to these particular verts. So go ahead and get these in-betweens right here. which is the webbing part of the digits. And then go ahead and grab the verts that you see that are not obviously red with a full influence to the hand and assign those to the hand. So at this point, basically just grabbing all the verts that will be assigned to the hand and assigning them. So I'm going to do this all the way up to the wrist. To about right here. Not really worried about going that much higher because I know that if I do, I'll just keep messing with it. But my focus needs to be on these fingers right now and get that knocked out. So it's the same process. At full influence of the tip. Full influence. Select the next bone up at the 0.4. So in this situation, I can see that adding half influence between the two bones, that it really pulls the verts down lower than I want them to be to this child bone. So as you see it, it really pulls it down. So what I'm going to do is just add more influence to the parent bone, just to even that out some. Same problem with these verts right here. I don't want to use my 6-4 equation because it pulls them down a lot lower than I want them to be. I'm going to use a 7-3. And of course, this may all change when I actually start moving the fingers, when I start doing my fine tuning, but pretty sure it's going to be the way it is now. So I'm going ahead and just assign full influence to this thumb bone right here on these verts. I know that they'll have some influence on the thumb bone, but most of the influence will be on the hand. But I'm basically just marking what it would look like. So I can see just by looking at the red that this bone will influence this area. I can see that I have some stray verts here. So I need to add the proper influence to them. So now I'm gonna go ahead and look at my folds and bends of my mesh and start fine tuning the skin of my verts. This part could be tricky since a lot of the rest of the mesh can get in the way and some of the folds are covered up. But this one right here is pretty visible, so I'll start messing with this one. So at this point I'm basically just subtracting and adding to see what looks best with the silhouette of my finger basically. If you make any edits on one side of the finger, try and grab the corresponding vert that's on the other side of the finger where you're editing, so they tend to be the same thing, or at least consistent with each other. So now I'm trying to look at the bend of this joint right here. Get that curve really nice and smooth. I'm gonna start adding some influence that we had set all the way to the hand. We're gonna start adding some of that influence to their finger bones that will be manipulating those verts. Go ahead and use a 6-4 equation on this one. On the back side of the hand, I want to try and keep the influence still predominantly the hand bone and just a little bit on the fingers, because I don't want the fingers to be pushing the verts into the hand. I want the hand to stay pretty solid to give that fold effect that we're looking for when he closes his hand. So I'm going to add 0.2 influence to these verts from their respectable finger bones. The idea to that is that I'll have 0.2 for these two verts, but when I get to this vert, it'll be split between these two fingers right here. So I'll add 0.1 to this finger and then 0.1 to this finger, which obviously adds up to 0.2. So now I'm going to start adding some influence from this bone to the hand bone. So most of the influence towards this top region of the thumb is going to be predominantly the hand. I'm going to try and work on this area right here now. Keep it from clipping like it's doing. Go select these verts. Go ahead and add those to the hand. And then start just blending. Grab these two verts and then add some influence. The same thumb bone. I'm going to try and keep these verts moving in the same consistency with the other verts being affected by the bone. So for example, I'm looking at this vert right here. And just by looking at this vert, kind of looks like it's standing alone. Just want to change the influence to be less of that thumb bone and more to the hand. So it looks like it's moving with these verts. Now I need to start selecting these four verts and add some influence to this thumb bone. Right now I'm just going to start with a very small amount. Right now I'm keeping in mind that I want to get my folds of the thumb to look proper. I'm just going to make adjustments as I move along. So now I'm going to start rigging my hand to the forearm. This will be pretty easy since it's static metal geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and just select a big chunk of this. And just add full influence to the forearm. Get that out of the way. Sometimes you can do the select element and get lucky. It won't actually be part of the whole mesh. So right now I'm just looking at the twist of the wrist here and basically just seeing what I have to work with. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab these ring everts and start adding some influence to the hand. So once again, what I'm trying to do is make sure my edges are pretty smooth and not jagged like this. So I'm just going to add some more influence to the forearm on some of these. In this case, I'm looking at my ring right here, and I don't like how it pretty much just flattens out in this area, so I just want to add some influence to the hand, make that more circular. I didn't like how much influence those two verts had with the hand, so I had to lower that down some. So on these verts, I'm just going to add very subtle influence to the hand. Don't really need to worry about it on this side since you can't see it and you probably never will see it. But I'm just going to try to look inside there and make sure there's nothing crazy or out of the ordinary.